Welcome to Comics Bazaar, the channel of comics commentary and arcana. This video features the Uncanny X-Men number 217, cover dated May 1987. So this is a very dynamic cover featuring Juggernaut versus Dazzler. Dazzler just having joined the team 2 issues earlier. She's still not up there in the top corner box, but here she is on the cover of the comic. And this one illustrated, the cover that is illustrated by Walter Simonson, inked by Bob Wiacek. Pretty cool looking cover, interesting delineation of Dazzler's light effects too, with all these different motion lines and circles. So let's open this one up to the splash page and see who our creative team is. So Chris Claremont, writer as ever. Jackson Guice, penciler, Steve Leialoha, inker, Tom Orzechowski, letterer, Glynis Oliver and Petra Scotese, colorists. So that's an indication that there must have been a bit of a deadline crunch on this one to have 2 colorists. The colorist, the last creator to touch the page before it goes off to the printer. So here we've got Psylocke running apparently for her life, set at nighttime on Muir Isle. And worth reading here are Claremont's narrative captions. Above Cape Wrath, on the north coast of Scotland, is a lovely slab of rock, jutting out of a sea that's silver-slashed obsidian, rolling in the light of the just-risen moon. Muir Isle, remote, desolately beautiful land as hard as the wind that whips down from the pole, as hard as this woman fleeing for her life. She was born Elizabeth Braddock. She's called Psylocke. Mutant, telepath, psychoblaster, one of the new members of that team of outcast heroes, the Uncanny X-Men. And the title of the issue, Folly's Gambit, it'll turn out to be Alison's foolish gambit later on in the story. But great colouring here, and I would warrant that this is by Glynis Oliver. It's her style, very nicely realised here. And maybe a better combination of Jackson Guice and Steve Leialoha than Dan Green, who inked him on the previous issue. Psylocke is running for her life, apparently, but not really. It turns out that what's going on is a training exercise, and she is engaged on one of those classic X-Men games of tag, and the rest of the X-Men team, excluding Storm and Wolverine, who are in America, out to try and tag Psylocke. But there's this little intercut scene of a trawler out on the sea with a little bit of dialogue between the skipper and one of the other sailors regarding this star blast that they see. They think it's an explosion, but it is Dazzler using her light powers to dazzle Psylocke. And then this sailor here, who in Thought Balloon reveals that he is working not for the captain, but for his true master, Dr. Doom. And then there's an editorial note here from Ann Nocenti explaining that this will all be worked out in Fantastic Four versus the X-Men issues 1 and 2. So a little signposting there to the reader that something is coming up on the racks and to keep a lookout for it. Also here in Psylocke's thoughts, we have an explanation why Dazzler's star flare blast doesn't actually blind her, because of the bionic eyes gifted to her by Mojo. So we're reminded of that, and the fact that they give her this ability to bear with any light shift, no matter how extreme. So a bit of an advantage for her, and not known by anyone else, because she hasn't shared with the rest of the team that she has those bionic eyes or their origins in New Mutants Annual number 2. So then we have the game of tag continuing. We've got Rogue and Dazzler working together, but there's a bit of tension between them because they have a history when they fought each other. And Dazzler saying here, I know what I'm doing, Rogue. I did fine on my own before I joined the X-Men. I was good enough to clobber you each time you tried to kill me, she says to Rogue. And So as I said, like, there's a bit of tension. Here's Psylocke using her telepathy to find out what Rogue and Dazzler's plans are. And so she is able to hit Rogue with one of these psychoblasts. And she confuses Rogue as well in terms of which direction the ground is. So Rogue ends up flying slam into this cliff side. But while Psylocke is concentrating on Rogue, she is laser blasted from behind by Dazzler. And let's see what happens next. So Dazzler races towards her. She's thinking here, Psylocke's lying so still. I only meant to stun her, but I'm still getting used to this new aspect of my light powers. My control isn't as precise as it needs to be. So she hopes she hasn't hurt her, but Psylocke was, as she says in American phrase, playing possum to draw Dazzler in close so she can seize control of her mind, which she does. And then she uses Dazzler's powers against Longshot, who has just popped into the scene. But Longshot, with his mutant luck power, manages to evade the blast and throw what turns out to be a net with spikes, pinning down both Dazzler and Psylocke. And Rogue comes in, breaks the net to get Dazzler free, and then she grabs Psylocke by the shoulder, it seems, and threatens to punch her block off. Does she yield? So she yields. So Psylocke has lost that game of tag. And then here, surprisingly, or perhaps not, who is the judge of all of this? It turns out to be Banshee. So he says, exercise is over, X-Men. Let's head back to the house for some breakfast, and I'll tell you how you did. So Banshee, at this point in his career, is without his mutant powers, which he lost back in Uncanny X-Men 119, and they won't be restored to him until issue 254, a few years down the road. So like Storm at the moment, he does not have his mutant powers, but is nonetheless useful. And useful in terms of being a kind of a Professor X substitute, helping these new team members hone their powers and skills working together. So he gives them feedback and is quite critical about Psylocke cutting across open country like she did, taking a fair risk. And she says she thought it was a very fair risk, since my psi powers gave me a precise fix on my pursuers and told me their plans. But Banshee says, still, you got nailed. Your power couldn't cope with Longshot's wild luck. And then he has some criticism for Rogue. Why didn't you drop Psylocke from the air? Dazzler's photon blast could have done the job without putting either of you at hazard. And she says there, I figured she could handle Betsy herself, but Banshee says you figured wrong. And that puts her into a bit of a strop, and she punches the corner of the table there, so disrupting breakfast. And then Banshee turns his judgment on Allison and says, why did you negate a perfectly sensible attack by rushing headlong to Psylocke's side, where she could get her psychic hooks into you? And then she kind of hesitatingly responds, I thought, no, you didn't think. Not in the way you have to in this business to survive. That's what these training sessions are all about. You all have strengths and weaknesses. So we get to the core of the lesson here. The point of working together, of being a team instead of a collection of individuals, is to enhance those strengths and balance out the weaknesses. Create a synthesis, a combat gestalt, wherein the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And that really does cut to the core of a theme that runs right throughout Claremont's tenure on the X-Men, his original tenure and subsequently. This idea of the X-Men combining perfectly in a combat gestalt, so that they can take down villains and threats greater than any one of them individually. And here we have it summed up very eloquently by Banshee over breakfast on Muir Isle. So then the scene cuts to not far from the house, the entrance to Moira MacTaggart's underground research complex, and down in the hospital wing, it's full to bursting with injured Morlocks, and also Kitty Pryde, Nightcrawler, and Colossus, though we don't see them here. And we have Moira talking with Callisto. Callisto is working out, exercising in the gym, and Moira says that she's got many borderline cases on the ward. She's pretty sure she'll lose some patients who'd pull through if they only had the will. And Callisto says, better off dead then. If their spirits are broke, world's got no place for them. And she's talking about her own people, the Morlocks. She was formerly their leader, but Storm, of course, is the current leader of the Morlocks. But Callisto, very tough and stoic in her attitude to what has happened, and training so as to remain fit should there be any more attacks by the Marauders or anyone else. Moira worried about the X-Men. I worry about Storm and Wolverine. How well are they coping? I suspect they've been scarred by this, the mutant massacre, more deeply than they let on. And without them to provide the core for the new team to build on, how will the X-Men endure, she asks. Callisto's fairly laconic. They won't, she says. And then we have some of the rest of the X-Men also training in the gym. Later on, though, after breakfast, we've got Banshee examining a bit of a muscle cramp that Psylocke has got. We've got Rogue working out hard, and we've got Ali working out too, but not doing as well as Callisto, who's stronger. Callisto mocks her. Poor babe, too much for you, hey? No muscles, less guts. And that really irks Allison. She says, you've no right to talk to me like that, Callisto. And Callisto, want to make something of it, Dazzler? And she pulls a knife on her. And here we've got that classic, this is still Glynis Oliver, that classic red background indicating a moment of, well, in this case, perhaps impending violence, like she's going to cut her throat. But Longshot, luckily for Ali, falls. He's been juggling those empty bottles there. And this gives Ali a chance to knock the knife out of Callisto, a dagger really, out of Callisto's hand. And so she stalks off. And she is really unhappy and thinking about how the world is dangerous and the X-Men are right. In these hard times with creeps like the Marauders hunting mutant scalps, I haven't a prayer of surviving on my own. But does the alternative mean becoming as hard as Callisto? I'm a singer, she thinks. All I ever wanted was to make people happy, to bring some light and colour and joy into their lives, not maybe end them. I hate this island, I hate this life, I hate the X-Men almost as much as I need them. So she's very conflicted about staying with the X-Men, remaining with them, becoming a proper member of the team, or leaving altogether. And she decides to set off from the island, but Rogue comes along with a jacket for her. And that kind of indicates, you know, that there is some growing bonds between these former enemies, and maybe some hope for the team. Rogue asks her, will he be coming back? And Ali says, I don't know. Your choice, take care. So, where does Ali go? She goes to Ullapool, a fishing port on the northwest coast of Scotland. And she gets into some regular clothes and she walks around the port town. And then her attention is caught by music. Those are bagpipes. What a sound, she thinks, outside Black Ned's pub. Singing too. And she smells the food. Sounds like a fair crowd, a real party. So she decides that this is just what the doctor ordered. And then our narrative captions are pretty cool again from Claremont. It's a Kaylee, a wondrously raucous Highland Saturday night fling, dispensing libation for the spirit as well as for the body. At first coming through the door, Ali's a little shy. Then she discovers there are no strangers here. We'll see this guy again shortly. It turns out his name is Connell. This looks like it could even be a little bit of a portrait of Claremont here. It looks like him from around this era in profile. And so she gets to dancing with a vengeance, dancing till her lungs ache and her body glows, never lacking for a partner, basking in their smiles, their touch. Every so often a man or woman joins the band to play a tune with them or try a song. Some are good, others less so. Nobody minds. Finally Alison takes her turn. The pub falls silent as her voice, glazed into a rich contralto by the pure malt she's indulged in, washes over the crowd. The songs are old and she does them justice. There are many tears when she's done as cheers. The night progresses, dances slow, dancers move closer. Gentle flirtations become something more serious. It's been too long since Ali was this happy. She means to savor every moment. So, it's interesting because a criticism that might be leveled at certain comics writers is that their captions are superfluous and or just repeat what you're seeing drawn by the artist. But Claremont, by this point in his career, has a very fine judgment of letting the art speak for itself, and in other cases adding this rich prose over the visuals, but not in tension with those visuals, but complementing them and augmenting the meaning. So this is really nicely done on these couple of pages and on the opening splash page too. And we'll see here as the narrative caption continues, this time of year, this close to the top of the world, the nights are long, the days mostly twilight. Roughly 500 miles from the Arctic Circle, the air is raw, searing the lungs and shocking the system fully awake with the first breath. It hurts, yet perversely, it also feels good. So after singing and dancing all night, Ali emerges from the pub with this new friend, perhaps potential love interest, Connell. And it's interesting that Claremont gives him that name because one of the members of Lila's band was also named Connell. So Claremont still thinking of that name and using it again here, but with a different kind of guy a few issues later from 214. And then the whole moment is an evening is ruined by the arrival of this guy, get out of my way you bozos, in his big loud red car. And Alison, shocked, realizes that from the X-Men's files, the driver's Cain Marko, the Juggernaut. So she instantly hops on a motorbike and goes straight after Juggernaut. And Connell there thinks, you far more courage than brains, I fear, my bonny Dazzler. I'd best phone you some help. So help will be coming ultimately for Ali. But in the meantime, she goes right after Juggernaut. And it's interesting here, we get a little window on the way that her powers work. She says here as she is riding along, better charge my sonic light powers full as can be. Always so weird when I do that, draining my immediate vicinity of all sound, surrounding myself with a globe of absolute silence. So that's not something we'd otherwise know. And here she is, she's out to prove herself to her teammates the way she could never to her father. So Claremont really thinking about who is Alison Blair, who is she beyond that character that first turned up as a disco diva, and giving her a lot more depth in this treatment of her as part of her true induction into the X-Men team. But here she is going solo, first of all, and in recall of the fact that she had her own title before it was cancelled, of course, and did have solo adventures, not working with a team. So here she's trying that trick again, but going up against the Juggernaut. And he dodges the bike and she slams right into the side of his car. She couldn't slow down in time or swerve. And she's ruined her clothes, which she thinks about, which again is just a little indication of her her character, somewhere on a spectrum of narcissism, yes. and she's hurt her side. But she's thinking tactically as well about how she needs to keep her distance. She doesn't dare let the Jugs get those paws on her. And he calls her a stupid skirt. Your bike dented my car. You don't want to leave here the same way, Frail. You better talk. Why were you after me? How come I didn't hear you? And then she tells him the name's Dazzler. And you, Buster, are the one who better behave himself. But this shocks the Juggernaut, and we get this comic moment here where he is delighted to see her. Dazzler, no fooling, fantastic. I got your records, I saw you perform, I love your music. But man oh man, I never thought I'd actually meet you. This is great. So Juggernaut turns out to be a massive fan of Dazzler's music. And so he is actually apologetic here of all the lousy luck. Hey, I'm sorry I scared you back in town and broke your bike. I'll make that good, I promise, but I gotta go. I'm on a job and running late. And Ali just jumps to a conclusion here. If it's the sort of job, I suspect, Buster, you're going to be later still. So she doesn't even ask him to explain what job he's on or listen to the guy. Instead, she just acts on this kind of instinct on the one hand, but also like a very 1960s Silver Age superhero rule book, assuming the worst in relation to Juggernaut. And we'll find out why he is in Scotland in the next issue, but no explanations here just yet. So she bursts the wheels, the tires of his car, and that really annoys him. And then she uses her powers on him. She tries to hypnotize him with her light powers, which is interesting. And it doesn't work on him, of course. And he says nobody hypnotizes him. And then he claps his hands together, that trick of the Juggernaut's, which sends her back with a big whoosh of air crashing into the snow of the ground. He says, don't you know who you're up against, Songbird? I'm the Juggernaut. Ain't nothing, ain't nobody can beat me. You keep pushing your luck, you make me mad, Dazzler, and you'll be sorry. So she realizes now that she has pushed her luck, and she's now got a very bad feeling about this. Overconfident, you know, pride comes before a fall, and that will be the case here with Dazzler. So she does her best to get away from the Juggernaut. Actually, very nice art and storytelling by Jackson Guice here on these pages. And Dazzler, look, fighting for her life as she sees it. And, having some mini successes, but she climbs to the top of this hill. And there's no sounds around. This is a great little thoughtful bit from Claremont as writer. She's up on top of the grassy knoll. So quiet out here, hardly any natural sounds. My panting's the loudest thing I hear. Didn't bring a cassette player or radio. Even static would provide noise enough to recharge my light powers. Didn't think I'd need any. I mean, how tough could this guy be? So this is Dazzler acting like an extrovert, reacting, not thinking. She's not strategic. She was overconfident, and now she's backed up into a corner here with Juggernaut just inexorably following her up the hill. And as she thinks here, the energy I've got left is all I've got left. No more chances or excuses. Once that's used up, I'm finished. It's got to count, she thinks. And so here we go. So this is a nice layout by Jackson, guys. These 6 panels, vertical. And we have Juggernaut facing Dazzler, getting blasted. Dazzler again, Juggernaut. And then we back away from the hill and we see her giving everything she's got left. Is it going to work? Is she going to stop the Juggernaut in his tracks? No, of course not. He stands over her and he says to her, ready to take your medicine? But she collapses. And he's of the belief, as he cradles her in his arms, that she's dead. And it's interesting here. He says, I worshipped her, I killed her. And she looks really out of it. So quite an interesting issue. Starting with that team exercise, the team dynamics not quite gelled yet. Everybody with fails from Banshee. And then Ali stalking off, getting away from the team, and not thinking about getting any backup or alerting the X-Men or acting like a member of a team and going after Juggernaut by herself and just basically failing. And maybe now she's dead. So I do hope that you enjoyed this review and commentary on Uncanny X-Men 217. If you did, please like the video. And if you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for more content like this.